In this last video, we're going to go over some miscellaneous rules and practice some phrases, words, and passages in Pingji. Okay, so our first miscellaneous rule has to do with two unique words. These are words that are pronounced with no vowels, and they're the words and ng. So the word there's actually only one word in Cantonese that has that pronunciation, and that's because the only word pronounced has the fifth tone. So technically we could write it MZ, but because this word is such a common word, it means not, you only need to write it as an M. Now on the other hand, the word spelled with the letter Q, this comes in different forms. There is a fourth tone, fifth tone, and sixth tone. And because it is variation, you do have to spell the tones. So here are some examples. Fourth tone, Fifth tone, there's a few of these, including the number 5, which is fairly common. And then the sixth tone, that's just spelled NQ using the normal sixth tone rules. Okay, next up is an optional spelling rule. This is using the umlaut, which is the German term for the double dots above a letter. I mentioned this in the very first video where there are 3 additional optional letters you can use. And basically, these 3 letters can be used in place of double vowels. The double dots represent the fact that they're doubled. So, for example, the word seung, instead of writing SOOQZ, you could just write it as SO umlaut QZ. However, there is an exception, and that's when the double letter is followed by an I or U, which turns into a Y or W. So basically, there's only 3 of these, AY, AW, and UY. You don't put the umlaut on those. And the reason for using the umlaut is mainly stylistic. You're using 1 letter instead of 2, so it's just easier and smoother to read. If you have a keyboard that could type these, you could improve your typing speed. So if you're writing Chinese characters using an IME, also if you're just typing online or like on the phone, it's again faster if you have the keyboard for that. And speaking of keyboard, the German keyboard actually contains all 3 characters, so it's the perfect one to use. Just a quick note on the apostrophe for the first tone. If you can help it, the symbol should be just a neutral apostrophe, not the curvy, comma-shaped ones that you use for quotations on the right over here. Also, for some reason, if you can't type out an apostrophe, then you can just omit it, and then people would have to assume this means the first tone. Next, I just want to quickly touch upon quotation marks. Because of the apostrophe, English quotation marks don't work very well. You could see 2 examples here using double and single quotation marks. The apostrophe kind of just blends into them. So instead, since we're already using the German keyboard for the umlauts, German quotation marks actually work much better. And you can see 2 examples here. Okay, next I want to touch on compound words. In pinyin, you often see words can be combined. So the word pinyin itself is written as 1 word instead of 2 separate words, pin and yin. Another thing that you can do in pinyin is an apostrophe mark. So for example, the city Xi'an, that's actually 2 characters. So you need an apostrophe to separate both of them. Otherwise, it could be read as a single word, xian. But in Pingji, we can't use the apostrophe. And also combining words is a little more complicated because of tone letters. So what we can do is use a hyphen. In some instances, if the word ends with an R or ends with a J, or if the next part of the word starts with an apostrophe, then you can skip the hyphen. But in general, I guess I would say compounds are kind of discouraged in Pingji because it's just harder to read when you mush things together. That said, many proper names, you should definitely combine them. And then simplified words, which I'll get to very shortly, you can combine those as well. Very common words can be combined. Like for example, the common word matye, meaning what, or neho, like hello. You can easily write those as 1 word and everyone will know what that means. And also, speaking of names, if you have proper names, then you can capitalize the first letter of each syllable and that makes it more readable and also bypass the need for hyphens. Okay, so I was just talking about simplification. So what do I mean by that? In general, if Pingji becomes more accepted and also becomes a tool for daily communication to a certain extent, I don't necessarily advocating completely replacing Chinese characters, but it could be used as an alternative communication tool. Then the next step would be to make a list of very, very common words, like for example, the top 100 words that could be simplified so that they don't have to be written with tones. So the very easy ones I could think of are the 3 main pronouns, me, you, and he, she, it. In Cantonese, those are ngõ, ne, and kleit. Those are all 5th tones, so they would be written with a Z at the end. But if you didn't write these with tones and someone gave you ngo, almost everyone will understand that you're talking about me or I. Same thing with ne, that's probably going to be you. Another category of words that can be simplified is certain numbers, and then especially some grammatical words, prepositions, particles, and major words like, for example, the word to be, the word to have, things like that. I already mentioned that the word which means not, is automatically simplified, and that could just be the first one on a list of multiple. And then lastly, and I'm not even sure how relevant this would be, if you have someone who goes by a Cantonese name and they need to transliterate it into like an English-speaking country or some other Western country, then there's some changes you can do to make things smoother. First is to disregard the tone letters because that would just add more confusion. You can change the Q to an NG. You could change the V to a U. And if you have contracted vowels like the AY, AW, and UY, you can uncontract them into double AI, double AU, double UI. Okay, so the next couple images are just a quick summary from A to Z of every single letter, every single tone that we talked about. If you want to go in alphabetical order and be like, oh, what was the letter L for, then this would put everything in order for you. I'm not going to go over each one in detail, so just feel free to pause the video and take a look at these. Okay, and to finish up, we're going to actually start using Pingji just so you can practice how it works and match the letters to their sounds in well-known words and phrases. So starting with some basic words and phrases, I'll just go through each of these. Hai, that's to be. Hai, not to be. Doje, thank you. Ngoi, another type of thank you or please. Daika, everyone. Ni hao ma, how are you? Dima, what's up? Guangdonghua, Cantonese. Zhonggokyan, Chinese person. And then here are some of my favorite words and what a lot of people associate with Cantonese, which is dim sum. So again, just focus on the Pingji, and as I read it to you, to see if it makes sense or if you're able to read it yourself. Ha gao, ha gao. Siu mai, siu mai. Pai guat, pai guat. Ngao tou, ngao tou. Lo bako, lo bako. Siu long bao, siu long bao. Cha siu bao, cha siu bao. Dan tat, dan tat. Alright, so remember in the beginning of the video series, I introduced a bunch of romanizations with this poem and compared how each one looked. Now what I'd like you to do is read this poem using Pingji, and I'm going to repeat this again using the umlauted versions. And since I don't really have a good voice for reciting poetry, I'm going to use the audio for someone who does, and I'm going to post a link to that video in the description below.
春曉，唐，孟浩然。春眠不覺曉，處處聞啼鳥。夜來風雨聲，花落知多少。春曉，唐，孟浩然。春眠不覺曉，處處聞啼鳥。夜來風雨聲，花落知多少。
Okay, and the last passage I'm going to do is something that's very popular with linguists. They like to take this passage from the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights and translate into every single language or every single alphabet system that's available. And here's this version in Cantonese.
人人生出嚟就係自由嘅，喺尊嚴同權利上一律平等。佢哋具有理性同良心，而且應該用兄弟間嘅關係嚟互相對待。
Okay, and I'm just going to do the same thing again, this time with umlauts.
人人生出嚟就係自由嘅，喺尊嚴同權利上一律平等。佢哋具有理性同良心，而且應該用兄弟間嘅關係嚟互相對待。
And then finally, here's just another reference image for anyone who is familiar with Yutping. This is how you convert Yutping to Pingji. And that's it. Thank you for listening, 多谢. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments.